Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We've been handed a truly fascinating stack of sources today. And on the surface, they're all about one thing: organizational expansion.
Right. Specifically within faith-based communities, churches.
Exactly. But the real mission here for you, the learner, is something so much broader. It's immediately applicable to really any organization you might lead or even just be a part of.
That's the key.
We are deep diving into what is essentially a universal playbook for building a resilient, high-engagement, multi-generational organization, the kind that survives and thrives far beyond its founding generation.
Precisely. And the material we have, it reads less like a devotional, and more like a strategic management guide from a top consulting firm.
Yes, crossed with a spiritual manual. It's this strange, compelling hybrid.
It is. They treat community health and organizational growth not as some miraculous, unpredictable event, but as a systematic, quantifiable, and most importantly, replicable process.
And it's that blend of ancient wisdom and, like you said, modern management theory that makes these sources so incredibly compelling.
It really is.
I was struck immediately by the core thesis, which is just.
Mm.
It's repeated across all the material we have. The central argument is that sustainable community growth is not about maximizing attendance on a Sunday.
No, not at all.
It's about maximizing connection, transformation, and service throughout the entire week.
That is the operational pivot, and it's a huge one. In this model, community is the purpose. It's the primary output, not just some happy byproduct of a weekend service.
So the institution's success is measured by the quality of the life being lived by its members on a Tuesday morning.
Exactly. Not just the head count on a Sunday morning. This simple shift, it changes everything. It moves the organization's entire energy from attraction, getting people in the door, to engagement.
Keeping them invested and truly transformed.
That's the goal.
And before we get into the operational specifics, and there are a lot, they outline these 15 best practices, we have to mention the philosophical context they set this in. It is breathtakingly ambitious.
It really is. The sources frame this entire effort by referencing the impending age of abundance,
Which was prophesied in the scriptures thousands of years ago.
Yes.
So this isn't a small vision.
No, it sets an extraordinarily high bar for what a truly functioning, healthy organization can achieve. It suggests that the full operational potential of this community model isn't, incremental growth.
It's exponential, limitless flourishing.
And they ground this in ancient prophetic texts. So it anchors the entire organizational strategy in this ultimate transcendent vision of success. It's not just about building a bigger church, it's about fulfilling a cosmic purpose.
So if that's the scale of the vision, how in the world do they suggest we get there?
With a very detailed plan.
Right. Our roadmap for this deep dive is comprehensive. We're going to systematically analyze these 15 best practices, many of which were only hinted at in the original sources you shared with us.
We'll need to drill down into the revolutionary role of small groups. They see them as the organizational heartbeat.
And then we're going to tackle the most surprising element, for me at least, the strategic application of the 10 Commandments.
As a modern, practical blueprint for community management and trust architecture.
It's the ultimate example of old wisdom being applied to new, complex problems.
It is. And we have to ensure we give detailed attention to the practices related to organizational structure, leadership pipelines, and governance. Those are the elements that often cause even successful communities to falter over time.
Absolutely. So let's start at the foundation. Let's define what they actually mean by sustainable and spiritually healthy growth. The why behind all of this. Okay, so the fundamental shift here, which any learner should grab immediately, is this move away from measuring numbers.
Right.
And instead, measuring depth and resilience. In the business world, we obsess over headcount and quarterly returns. But these sources argue that numerical growth alone, without that depth, creates what they call fragile institutions.
And this is such a critical distinction. A fragile institution can look incredibly successful from the outside.
Sure. Big building, lots of people.
Exactly. It can have a massive budget, a huge congregation. But if the connections inside are superficial, and if the members lack real maturity, that institution is extremely vulnerable.
Vulnerable to what?
To anything, really. An internal scandal, a key leadership change, or even just an external cultural shift. The foundations are weak, they're built on sand, and the organization gets consumed by just managing its own size rather than actually delivering its mission.
So sustainable growth, How do they explicitly define it?
It's defined by a deeper commitment. It's about deepening faith, yes, but also expanding tangible impact in the community.
And building a network of people whose lives are demonstrably transformed.
Demonstrably, that's the key word. It requires spiritual vitality, certainly, but also rigorous strategic clarity and authentic relationships, all moving together in the same direction. It's a holistic ecosystem.
And if that's the goal, then the metrics have to change. You can't measure transformation with an attendance count.
You can't. If transformation is the goal, you need transformation metrics. The sources list these highly specific healthy growth indicators. They're designed to measure internal fortitude and external impact.
Like what, specifically?
Things like increased prayer life and biblical literacy, you can actually survey that. Measurable character transformation patience, integrity, empathy, high levels of service participation, and, maybe most importantly, tangible reports of emotional and relational healing within the community.
That's a radical departure from traditional organizational reporting.
It is.
You're measuring the quality of the individual member, the raw material of the community, and their lived outcomes, not just their presence in a seat.
Which means the core goal shifts. It's no longer about attracting spectators. It's about molding actively engaged disciples.
The sources are really clear on this point. They say if you're successful in fostering genuine transformation, you actually stop needing to market the organization.
You do. Because people naturally become enthusiastic ambassadors. The institution is providing undeniable, positive, life-altering outcomes for them. And that organic, enthusiastic word of mouth is the most reliable, cost-effective, and powerful growth engine any organization could possibly possess.
This whole philosophy, though, it has to be driven by an ironclad sense of purpose. Which brings us to the very first best practice they outline.
Practice 1.
The necessity of a clear, constantly repeated vision and mission. A strong mission, they state, is the only thing that prevents organizational drift.
And drift is a silent killer for organizations. It's the slow, almost imperceptible erosion of purpose.
And what causes it?
Usually it's caused by prioritizing other things over the mission, things like comfort or finances or just short-term demands. To prevent it, the vision has to answer 3 very specific, almost analytical questions.
Okay, what are they?
First, what is the ideal future state? In their terms, what is God calling this organization to become? A clear picture of the destination. Second, who are we specifically meant to serve? You have to define the target demographic and the geographic area. You can't be everything to everyone.
And third, what spiritual or relational problem are we uniquely positioned to solve in our community?
Right.
That third question is basically a required market analysis. It forces the organization to articulate its unique value proposition.
It does. If you can't clearly define the problem you solve, your existence is largely redundant. You're just another option.
Let's elaborate on that for a second. If a church in a rapidly gentrifying urban area defines its core problem as isolation and economic displacement,
its mission is going to look vastly different than a church in a stable, affluent suburban area whose problem might be affluence-induced anxiety and broken family structures.
so the vision has to be localized, specific, actionable.
Absolutely. And once that vision is established, the source material demands that it must align everything. Everything. Sermons, outreach, leadership decisions, budgets, programs, the culture itself, it all has to serve those 3 answers. If any program or budget item cannot be directly justified by how it serves the core mission, it is causing drift.
And it must be cut.
It has to be. The vision needs to become a living language. It's repeated from the pulpit, embedded in onboarding documents for new members and staff, and it should be visible on every wall. It's the North Star for every single decision.
So we've defined the vision, the why. But now let's address a practice that is often overlooked in growth models, but is central to the long-term resilience of any organization. Practice 2, effective leadership team structure.
Yes, this is crucial.
How do these sources advise structuring the command chain to support this very different, mission-driven, non-numerical kind of growth?
This is where that synthesis of spiritual leadership and real managerial competence is absolutely required. The sources insist on a clear separation of spiritual authority and managerial authority.
No, it's so different.
The spiritual authority is the senior leadership. They're responsible for vision, for teaching, for the why. The managerial authority is the operational staff. They're responsible for execution, for budgets, for the how.
And why is that separation so critical? It seems like in a lot of organizations, the leader does both.
And that's the problem. because mixing the two inevitably leads to burnout and, frankly, poor decision-making. If the senior leader, whose job is prophetic vision, is also bogged down by managing the facilities budget or the parking lot schedule.
Both roles suffer. The vision gets lost in the weeds.
Precisely. The sources advocate for a leadership team that is highly centralized on vision, but aggressively decentralized on execution.
So a core executive team drives the why, and then functional teams manage the how in their different operational areas, teaching, small groups, finance, outreach, and so on.
Exactly. And the key performance indicator for this leadership structure is multiplication.
Not addition, multiplication.
Right. The leadership team's success is measured not by how many tasks they personally handle, but by how many new leaders they identify, train, and empower to carry the mission forward in their own areas.
It's about building a lattice, not a pillar.
That's a perfect way to put it. This structured approach to delegation ensures that the organization can actually scale without overwhelming the central visionary leadership. You're building capacity at every level.
All right, so now we transition from the organizational structure to the core elements of that Sunday experience. Because while the Sunday service isn't the only thing, the sources are clear that it remains the primary mechanism for communicating the vision and inspiring commitment.
It's the front door for many people. It's the rallying point.
So how must the formal elements, the teaching and the worship, how do they have to evolve to support this broader community mission?
This is where the sources really tackle that tension between honoring tradition and maintaining cultural relevance.
A tough balance to strike.
A very tough balance. Practice 3, powerful and relevant teaching, requires leaders to be biblically grounded and acutely culturally aware. If you are only one of those things, you are either irrelevant or you become unmoored.
The sources argue that preaching is the backbone of ideological continuity. What specific standards must effective sermons meet to be considered, well, effective?
They detail a really clear 4-part requirement for efficacy. First, the sermon must be biblically grounded. That's the anchor. Fidelity to the source texts is non-negotiable.
Okay, that makes sense. What's second?
Second, it must be culturally aware. It has to address the specific, real-life struggles of the modern audience. Things like anxiety, relationships, purpose, identity, financial stress, the feeling of being saturated by technology.
It has to meet people where they actually are.
Exactly. Third, it has to combine that theology with practical, actionable application. It's not enough to explain what the text meant 2,000 years ago.
You have to explain how it changes the listener's life on Monday morning.
Yes. What do I do with this? How does this help me with my difficult boss or my struggling marriage?
And the fourth part.
The language must be accessible. You have to avoid unnecessary jargon or overly academic complexity that alienates people. And the delivery must consistently balance truth, which can be a difficult, challenging message of transformation, with grace and empathy.
So a sermon that achieves all that functions as both an intellectual roadmap and an emotional call to action.
That's the goal. It has to engage both the head and the heart.
That requirement of practical application seems to be what separates this model from a purely academic institution. It means the message can't just be timeless in theory. It has to be timely in its specific application to our current cultural context.
Absolutely. This is why the sources say growing churches cannot be afraid to engage contemporary questions while still remaining firmly grounded in that timeless wisdom.
It's a real balancing act.
A very difficult one. For example, if you're addressing anxiety in the digital age, you have to ground that discussion in ancient principles of trust and rest, but you have to apply it specifically to the dynamics of social media and comparison culture.
So you have to show how the ancient wisdom is still the most relevant solution to the modern problem.
You have to connect the dots for people. Otherwise, it's just an interesting history lesson.
Okay, so if powerful teaching is the mind of the organization, then practice 9, authentic worship experience, is its emotional core. The sources place a huge emphasis here on presence, not performance, and encounter, not entertainment.
This is a direct countermeasure against the consumerist impulse that plagues so many large organizations today. Many of them try to compete with entertainment venues on production value.
The lights, the smoke machines, the professional band.
Exactly. And the result is you get audiences who are entertained but not truly engaged. They become purely passive spectators waiting for the next song or the next show.
So how do they define the difference between excellence and consumerism in this context? Because you still want it to be good, right?
Of course. Excellence means prioritizing quality. It means making sure the sound system works, the facility is clean, and the presentation is thoughtful and well prepared. Consumerism means prioritizing spectacle and creating a performance designed purely to elicit applause or to boost attendance numbers.
It's about the why.
It's all about the why. They insist on focusing on a genuine connection to the sacred experience, prioritizing diversity in musical expression to reflect a broad community, and, this is key, emphasizing congregational participation over a stage spectacle.
So the measure of success is the participation level, not the quality of the light show.
Precisely. Is the room singing along? Are people connecting? Or are they just watching a concert?
The sources introduce this really beautiful conceptual analogy here. Worship is a tool, not the goal. Let's explore that tension, because defining worship as a tool, well, it risks commodifying the spiritual experience for the sake of organizational output.
That's a great point, and it's the crucial pushback we need to apply. How do you use something so sacred as a tool without cheapening it?
Right. How do the sources address that potential conflict?
They handle it by defining the ultimate goal as character transformation and relationship health.
Okay.
So worship becomes the vital tool. They use the analogy of watering the roots that instills qualities in the individual. Qualities like patience, humility, empathy. These are necessary for the flourishing community, which is the tree above ground.
So it's a necessary means to a relational end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The focus isn't on the feeling you get during the song. The focus is on the kind of person you become because of your consistent engagement with worship.
So if the individual members consistently engage in authentic worship, they become intrinsically more patient, more empathetic, more mature.
Yes. And if they're better people, the relationships within the small groups and the wider community will naturally be exponentially stronger and more resilient. The conflict is neutralized because the organization's output isn't quantifiable attendance.
The output is the high-quality character of the members.
Exactly. It takes all the pressure off the worship team to entertain and refocuses their job on facilitating genuine internal encounter.
And it links directly back to those metrics we talked about in part 1. If transformation, which is measurable character growth, is the ultimate goal, then worship has to be designed to enable that. It has to be substantive, not merely aesthetic. This is where we shift to the implementation of the community mission itself. How does an organization that might serve hundreds or even thousands of people successfully replicate that feeling of family?
Right, where every single individual feels seen and known.
The playbook dedicates massive energy to this, and it starts with Practice 4.
Practice 4 is radical hospitality. And they elevate this concept beyond mere pleasantness. They actually define it as holy work.
Holy work, that's a strong phrase.
It is. It's an understanding that first impressions are not just crucial, they are a direct reflection of the organization's internal culture. Genuine warmth is required, not just forced friendliness or transactional politeness. This is about operationalizing human connection.
Okay, operationalizing warmth. What are the tangible systems required to do that? This can't be something you just leave to chance.
No, it's a robust, integrated system. It breaks down into 3 parts. First, the physical environment must be designed for psychological safety.
Meaning what?
Clear signage so people don't feel lost and stupid. Easy navigation, clean and well-maintained facilities. You're communicating care before a word is spoken.
Okay, second part.
Second is the people component. This means warm greeters, intentional welcome teams whose sole job is to reduce anxiety and answer questions. Their metric for success is how many newcomers they made feel at ease.
And third,
And this is often missed, is the follow-up systems for newcomers. It's not just one automated email, it's a deliberate multi-contact system. Maybe a personal call from a volunteer, a short welcome gift sent to their home, an invitation to a low-stakes orientation event.
the objective isn't just to make people comfortable physically, but to make them feel comfortable relationally. You are signaling immediate, unconditional belonging from the very first interaction.
Correct. The core result must be that people return because they feel seen, welcomed, and valued. If a newcomer leaves feeling like a number, the entire system has failed, regardless of how good the sermon was. Hospitality is the supply chain for relationship building.
So if radical hospitality is the welcoming mechanism, then practice 5 intentional small groups is the manufacturing plant for transformation and belonging.
That's a great way to put it. This is repeatedly called the heartbeat and the basic unit of the organization. It's the place where the mission truly lives.
This is the transformation zone.
It is. The sources are very clear on this. Large services inspire broad concepts. Small groups transform individual lives. This is where a generalized faith becomes a specific, lived, accountable experience. Without this step, the community just remains a collection of inspired individuals.
Not an integrated family.
Exactly.
And the purpose of these groups, it extends far beyond just a simple Bible study, right?
Totally.
What are the key outputs they're designed to produce?
They have multiple functions. They're designed to create accountability for that character transformation we keep talking about. They cultivate deeper relationships, moving people beyond superficial acquaintance. They establish emotional and spiritual safety, which allows for real vulnerability and open sharing.
A place to be real.
Yes, and a dedicated space for prayer and emotional support. Critically, though, they also serve as leadership pipelines. This is where you identify and vet future leaders in a low-stakes environment.
Okay, let's drill down into the research-backed optimal size because the source material is very, very specific here. 5, 7, or 9 people. Why these odd numbers? And why this specific range? What makes it so functional for intimacy and accountability?
This is where organizational science really meets relational psychology. The odd number is a simple mechanical design choice. It prevents deadlocks in low-level decision-making. You never have a 3-3 tie on where to go for dinner.
So it just removes a small point of friction.
Exactly. But the size range itself, that dictates the intimacy level. Let's break down the dynamics of each size.
Okay.
A 5-person group offers maximum intimacy. Everyone feels compelled to share. The risk of anonymity is near zero, and it's very easy to manage conversationally. The downside: if 1 or 2 people are absent, the group loses its momentum very quickly.
It feels empty.
Right. A 7-person group is often seen as the sweet spot. It allows for multiple perspectives, it maintains a strong personal connection, and it has enough critical mass to remain dynamic even with a few absences.
And a 9-person group.
A 9-person group is the upper limit for this model of intimacy. It allows for a greater diversity of experience and thought, and it's large enough to support the rotating leadership roles effectively, which we can talk about in a minute.
But the moment you cross that double-digit barrier, 10 or more, the feeling of family starts to erode. It's replaced by subgroups and superficiality.
Exactly. The moment an individual feels they can hide in the crowd, the core function of accountability and vulnerability is compromised, and the system fails. The organizational imperative here is to manage the group size aggressively.
So successful groups are expected to, what, split?
Yes, they're expected to multiply. When a group reaches its capacity limit, the goal is to celebrate its health by birthing a new group. It's seen as a sign of success, not a painful divorce.
And the sources emphasize that the formation of these groups must be organic. It has to be flexible and driven by members' choice, not some mandatory corporate assignment.
Because rigidity kills community. People need the freedom to join groups based on shared interests or demographics, young parents, empty nesters, professionals in the tech industry. They need to be able to step back when life demands it, or even start a new group based on a new interest.
So that organic formation ensures that engagement drives the growth, rather than enforcement driving resentment.
Perfectly said. You pull people in, you don't push them.
Okay, now to ensure ownership and prevent leader burnout, you mentioned these rotating roles within the small groups. What are the roles, and how do they function?
This is the internal operational structure that turns a friendship group into a resilient, self-sustaining unit. The sources detail at least 4 essential roles that rotate regularly, maybe quarterly or semi-annually.
First one?
First is the facilitator. This person guides the discussion, ensures everyone is heard, and keeps the group aligned with the week's curriculum or focus. This is the traditional leader role.
Okay, second.
Second is the prayer leader. This person is responsible for the spiritual centering of the group. They open and close in prayer, and they're tasked with tracking specific prayer requests and, just as importantly, following up on answered prayers to build faith.
What's next?
Third is the accountability partner, or sometimes they call it the shepherd. This person provides weekly, confidential check-ins with 1 or 2 other members of the group. This is the mechanism that translates abstract faith into concrete behavior. Are you keeping the commitments you made?
And the fourth role?
The service coordinator. This person is responsible for organizing one small, localized outreach or service project for the group each quarter. This ensures the group remains externally focused and doesn't become a holy huddle.
The genius of rotating these roles is twofold, isn't it? It prevents the facilitator from becoming a bottleneck, a single point of failure.
Right. It prevents burnout for that one leaderly person.
And it also ensures that every single member is being actively trained in leadership, spiritual guidance, service management, and accountability.
It embeds ownership deep within the community structure. When a member has rotated through all 4 of these roles, they stop seeing the small group as a service that's being provided to them.
And they start seeing it as a community they are actively co-creating.
Exactly. And that multiplication of internal capacity, member by member, group by group, is the secret to scaling the entire organization sustainably.
We've established the internal architecture, the vision, the leadership structure, the teaching, the small groups. Now we have to look outward.
Right. Focusing on the external impact and the internal efficiency required for growth.
This is where we connect that strategic clarity we talked about, practice 1, to external action, which is practice 6, and internal management, practice 10.
And this section really treats the organization like a crucial public good, a legitimate problem-solving entity within the community's ecosystem.
So practice 6 is strategic outreach. The idea here is that churches must become indispensable to their communities.
Indispensable. The goal is to solve real problems and make the church a trusted, essential presence, not just a place people go on Sunday.
This means moving beyond just, generic charitable giving to very targeted problem solving. What are some of the specific examples of effective mission-aligned outreach that the sources provide?
The examples they give really demonstrate a commitment to both immediate relief and long-term systemic improvement. They include things like large-scale food drives, yes, but also neighborhood cleanup and disaster relief efforts.
So the hands-on stuff.
Very hands-on. Also providing free professional counseling services for mental health, youth mentoring and tutoring programs focused on academic and life skills. And this one is huge, comprehensive job training and life skills workshops for single parents or the recently incarcerated.
Wow. That is a huge operational commitment. That's moving the organization into spaces that are traditionally occupied by NGOs or social services.
It is. And the sources stress that the community should recognize the organization as a force for good, even if they never step inside for a service. This is absolutely critical for building trust and relevance in a skeptical world.
And it's not just about services.
No. They also emphasize holding community dialogues and cultural events that actively bring diverse voices together to tackle social issues, fostering reconciliation rather than segregation.
To manage that massive scope in the modern era, you need technology. And that brings us to practice 8. The sources state unequivocally that the modern church must exist both physically and digitally.
Yes. The digital space is not a supplement. It's a non-negotiable extension of the physical community.
Why so critical?
Because the digital presence ensures that the core thesis maximization of connection and transformation throughout the week is actually achievable.
It's the how for the throughout the week part.
Exactly. The digital components are basically a sophisticated media strategy that supports the community. High-quality live stream services for accessibility. Active, engaging websites and social media channels that share stories of transformation, not just announcements.
What else?
Robust email and messaging systems for continual engagement, sending out devotionals, group updates, service opportunities, and the creation of specific content like podcasts, YouTube videos, and targeted devotionals that people can consume on their own time.
And perhaps most essentially, offering things like online prayer and counseling services to meet emotional and relational needs instantly, regardless of a person's location or time constraints. The digital realm facilitates the continuity of care.
And that continuity is the bridge to practice 10, which is the surprising integration of analytics. They call it data-informed decision-making.
So they're really using analytics like a tech company. That seems counterintuitive for a faith-based group.
It does, but the sources state clearly that wisdom and spirituality not only can coexist with data, but that effective stewardship of resources demands it. The idea is you must be guided by faith, but you have to track your performance metrics diligently.
This requires tracking beyond simple attendance numbers. What specific data illuminates the blind spots for these organizations?
They track 5 major categories of data. First, attendance trends and growth rate.
Yeah.
That's standard, but they segment it by life stage and group affiliation to see who they are and aren't reaching.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, engagement levels. This is crucial. It tracked activity across the week, small group participation rates, how frequently people attend services, and digital content consumption. It shows who is truly connected.
Third,
Volunteer participation rate. Not just the raw number of volunteers, but the retention rate and the distribution of volunteer hours across different programs. Are your volunteers burning out? Is one program sucking up all the energy?
fourth is conversion and baptism rates.
Yes, a direct metric of external impact and the ability to fulfill that core transformation mission.
And the fifth category.
Community impact metrics. This is about quantifiable results of the outreach we just discussed. For example, pounds of food distributed, number of individuals placed in jobs through your program, number of students mentored, or even the measured reduction in community conflict through mediation services you've offered.
This is incredibly sophisticated management. The benefit is just so clear. Data illuminates where your emotional investment is highest versus where your organizational resources are being wasted.
Exactly. It allows for smarter, more accountable stewardship of both time and capital. It creates the ultimate feedback loop.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If your stated mission is to solve economic displacement in your community, and your data shows you have high volunteer hours in your job training program but very low job placement numbers, the program is ineffective.
And it must be immediately retold or eliminated.
Yes, it forces organizational honesty by subjecting your emotional efforts to strategic accountability. You can't just feel good about trying, you have to be effective.
And this all ties directly into practice 15, which is continuous learning and adaptation.
Yeah.
You use the data to evolve.
You have to. The sources emphasize that rigidity is the enemy of relevance. Practice 15 dictates that the organization must embed mechanisms for regular, intentional feedback and evaluation.
Like,
Things like annual organizational surveys for all members, focus groups with different demographic slices of the community, and leader retreats that are specifically dedicated to scenario planning and adaptation.
what are they adapting to?
They have to constantly adapt to demographic shifts in their neighborhood, to technological changes like moving from DVDs to podcasts or adapting to new social media platforms, and to cultural changes. The types of anxieties or ethical dilemmas the community is facing today are not the same as 10 years ago.
The sources insist that the moment a church believes it has arrived or mastered its community,
It begins its slow decline into irrelevance. They have to maintain a posture of constant, humble learning. And that often means looking externally to see what successful organizations, even secular ones, are doing effectively.
all right, this next segment requires a deep, detailed exploration. It is, for me, the most conceptually unique aspect of the sources. We are taking the Ten Commandments rules that are traditionally viewed as highly personal moral guides,
Right. Individual ethics.
and we are reframing them as essential organizational architecture. The sources literally call them a manual for building strong, healthy, and thriving communities.
It's a genius piece of managerial reframing. The argument is that these commandments are the ultimate social contract. They're designed primarily to teach members how to treat others well, how to build the necessary social capital of trust, and how to foster a culture where everyone feels secure and can flourish.
So the ethical structure is the non-negotiable scaffolding that's required to sustain the community. If the community is the goal, the ethical code ensures its survival.
Precisely.
Let's break down the two major sections, starting with the first four commandments. These relate to devotion, worship, and reverence. At first glance, they seem purely internal. Worship God alone, avoid idols, honor the name, and observe the Sabbath. How does my personal devotion impact the organization as a whole?
The sources outline a very clear causal link. They argue that devotion strengthens moral character. When individuals cultivate virtues like patience, integrity, and self-control through consistent, sincere devotion, those qualities are not sequestered.
They don't stay private.
Not at all. They spill directly over into their relationships and their organizational interactions. If the members are individually less impulsive, less narcissistic, and more self-aware, the organizational friction automatically decreases.
Yeah, fewer conflicts to manage.
Exactly. They become better neighbors, better leaders, and more reliable volunteers. Furthermore, that shared faith creates unity, a strong cultural glue, and a shared, non-negotiable moral framework. So when conflict does arise, there is a unified understanding of fundamental right and wrong to appeal to.
Let's focus on the Sabbath observance for a moment. Commandment 4 is usually framed as individual rest, but the sources frame it communally.
They do. Sabbath observance is defined as a collective rhythm. It's a mandated weekly pause that allows the entire community to synchronize its schedules.
Why is that synchronization so important?
Because this collective rest is essential for connection. It allows families and neighbors to connect with each other outside of the context of productive labor. It allows them to support each other, to participate in communal life, strengthening social bonds that might otherwise be frayed by the constant demands of work.
So it's basically an organizational health policy disguised as a spiritual directive.
That's a great way to think about it. The first four commandments are implicitly defined as tools, a training ground for community leadership. designed to mold people into high-quality, reliable, empathetic, organizational members.
They build the character, wisdom, and empathy required to navigate the complexity of high-stakes, multi-generational relationships.
Right. The organization is essentially betting its entire success on the premise that consistent character development reduces the need for conflict management, frees up leadership time, and dramatically lowers the structural overhead of running the place.
Okay, now let's move to the last 6 commandments. These are direct, explicit instructions for relationship and community management, the social contract clauses.
These ensure the safety and the longevity of the social unit itself. We can go through them systematically to see how each one functions as a kind of organizational policy.
Let's do it, starting with the 5th. Honor your parents.
This command strengthens the family unit, which the sources identify as the foundational building block of any society. A community cannot be resilient if its families are constantly fractured or in conflict. This command encourages stability and the respectful intergenerational transfer of wisdom.
Which, as we discussed earlier, is practice 11. Intergenerational integration. It's all connected.
Are all connected.
The next 3, do not murder, steal, or lie, are the absolute minimum requirements for trust in any system.
They establish non-negotiable safety, integrity, and fairness. In an organizational context, do not steal extends beyond physical property. It includes stealing organizational time, stealing credit for someone else's work, or stealing intellectual property.
If members fear deception, theft, or sabotage, the community collapses into paranoia and rivalry.
It does. These 3 commands are the anti-corruption policy of the organization.
And finally, do not commit adultery or covet. These focus on respect, emotional boundaries, and internal unity.
Right. Adultery destroys relational stability, often fracturing the very family units necessary for the community's resilience. But coveting is perhaps the most insidious organizational destroyer. Because it replaces gratitude with rivalry and internal competition, it creates a zero-sum mentality inside what should be a collaborative environment. The sources argue that these commandments create an environment where people feel secure, respected, and non-threatened by the success of others.
Which reduces conflict and fosters accountability.
It's the only way to build a culture of mutual support.
The ultimate testing ground for these ancient rules is the small group. This is where the theory meets reality. This is where the abstract ethical blueprint becomes actionable.
This is where the rubber meets the road. Small groups are designed to facilitate the practice of these commandments. They require honest sharing, which forces members to practice truthfulness commands 8 and 9 by discussing their struggles openly rather than hiding them.
They're also the perfect venue for conflict resolution.
Absolutely. Misunderstandings can be mediated and reconciliation can be fostered. This is practicing the essence of do not murder, which is about removing destructive hatred, and do not steal, which is about restoring what was taken relationally.
Let's take the specific application of the 10th commandment, coveting. It is so easy to fall into rivalry in a professional or even a volunteer environment. How does a small group actively turn coveting into gratitude and collaboration?
The sources suggest structured exercises to combat this. Instead of allowing rivalry to fester in private, the group focuses on celebrating each other's successes and practicing gratitude together.
They provide an anecdote for this, right?
They do, and it's a powerful one. 2 members of a small group are competing for the same professional promotion at their company. Instead of isolating and viewing each other as the enemy, they use their small group to share strategies, to practice interview questions, and to offer prayer and support for each other.
So what happened?
If one of them gets the job, the success becomes a shared victory for the group, not a personal loss for the other. It completely neutralizes the temptation to covet, and it promotes collaboration over competition.
You're essentially creating an internal anti-rivalry culture.
Exactly. And the actionable steps here are comprehensive. Leaders must consistently teach the practical, organizational meaning of these commands from the front. Small groups must encourage specific reflection on ethical choices people made during the week. Leaders must model this ethical behavior transparently.
And critically, those accountability networks, often using that rotating accountability partner role, must be established to ensure that the ethical commitments people make are actually upheld. It's not just talk.
It has to be walked out in real life with real support and real accountability.
So we've built the operational structure, the inspirational core, the relational engine, and the ethical scaffolding. Now we have to look at the human capital component.
Right. The people and the culture requirements for long-term resilience and growth.
This part focuses entirely on multiplying capacity through people. and ensuring the organization actually reflects the community it claims to serve.
We have to start with practice 7, strong leadership development. We touched on this in practice 2, but here we focus on the process itself. Growth requires multiplying leaders, and leadership in this model is fundamentally defined as empowerment, not control.
How do you operationalize the multiplication of leaders? It's easy to say, hard to do.
The sources outline a very clear pipeline process. First, identification. You have to be spotting potential leaders early, often within the small groups through observation of how they handle those rotating roles.
So you're looking for character and faithfulness in small things.
Exactly. Second is coaching and mentoring. You pair those potential leaders with seasoned ones for consistent guidance and support. Third, you need formal training systems. You provide actual curriculum on things like servant leadership, conflict resolution, and basic management skills.
And the fourth step.
Fourth is delegation with safety nets. You have to entrust new leaders with real responsibility. But, crucially, you have to allow room for growth and for mistakes without a punitive consequence.
That allowance for mistakes is the secret sauce, isn't it? If the leadership environment is high stakes and totally unforgiving, talented individuals will just opt out of taking on responsibility.
Absolutely. The organization has to foster a culture where failure is seen as a learning event, not a career killer. This ensures a constant, courageous stream of new talent is willing to step up and carry the mission forward.
Okay, so if leaders are the vision carriers, then the volunteers are the lifeblood. Practice 12 calls them the lifeblood and the engine of church growth.
They're the ones who turn a building into a living, responsive community.
So how do we ensure they are treated not as free labor, but as co-creators of the mission?
This requires a highly sophisticated approach to volunteer management that really mirrors professional HR. Volunteers have to feel called, empowered, and genuinely appreciated. The sources list 5 best practices that go far beyond a simple thank you note at the end of the year.
What's the first one?
First, clear role descriptions. Volunteers need to know exactly what is expected of them and, just as importantly, when their shift ends. This prevents mission creep and burnout.
Okay, second.
Regular appreciation. This has to be both public celebrations, recognition during services, and private. A personal thank you call from a leader, a small gift card, it has to be consistent.
Third is spiritual encouragement.
Yes, volunteers, especially those in high-stress roles like counseling or working with children, must receive focused spiritual and emotional support from the organization's paid staff. You can't let them pour out without pouring back into them.
Number 4.
Clear leadership pathways. Volunteers need to see how their current role can lead to increased responsibility or specialized training. This connects back to practice 7, the leadership pipeline.
And the 5th best practice.
Emotional and logistical support. This means providing practical things like childcare during their service time, compensating for parking, and ensuring all the necessary tools and supplies they need are available immediately. You remove the friction so they can focus on the mission.
This level of care creates a virtuous cycle, doesn't it? High engagement drives growth, and that growth drives even higher engagement because people want to be part of something that genuinely values their time and their effort.
Exactly. It minimizes volunteer turnover, it maximizes the quality of their work, and it ensures that the organization has the critical mass of human energy required to execute its wide scope of outreach and community programs.
Next, we have to address practice 11, intergenerational integration. The danger the sources cite here is becoming age-segregated silos.
Or, critically, retirement homes, where the organization lacks any kind of succession plan. A healthy community must intentionally engage all generations, youth, adults, and elders.
Segregation is a structural defect. If the young adults leave because there is nothing targeted for their life stage, or if the elderly feel irrelevant and pushed aside,
the organization loses both its future and its wisdom. It's a death sentence.
what are the specific benefits of mandatory integration?
Well, generational wisdom is shared freely. Mentorship between life stages is encouraged and facilitated. And the programming itself reflects the full spectrum of human life experience. This creates incredible resilience because if one age group shifts its focus or faces a demographic dip, the others maintain stability and continuity for the whole.
So what are the specific, actionable steps to ensure meaningful cross-generational contact? It can't just be about them awkwardly sharing the same building space.
No, it has to be structured. You create targeted programs for each stage, career support and financial literacy for young adults, parenting workshops for the middle group, robust senior support groups. But the vital step is mandatory cross-generational programming.
Like what?
Like pairing seniors as spiritual mentors for high school students, or having young adults host workshops to assist elders with digital literacy. You have to provide structured, mission-aligned opportunities for the generations to interact meaningfully in a service capacity.
We have to ensure we cover the organizational ethics related to trust, which ties directly back to our discussion in Part 5. This is Practice 13, Transparent Governance and Accountability. The sources call this practice the insurer of long-term loyalty.
Yes, and we can't overstate its importance. Trust is the non-monetary currency of any community. Without it, every relationship becomes transactional and short-lived.
The sources insist on 3 pillars for maintaining transparent governance. What are they?
First is financial transparency. Budgets must be open, they must be understandable, and they must be regularly presented to the membership. Where's the money going? Is it actually aligning with the stated mission from Practice 1? Members need to see that every dollar is stewarded ethically and effectively.
Second pillar.
Ethical leadership. Leaders must not only model the ethical blueprints, like the commandments, but they must also be subject to clear, predefined accountability structures. This often involves external boards or third-party oversight to ensure impartiality.
And the third pillar is integrity in conflict resolution.
Yes. When conflict or misconduct or disagreements arise, and they will, the organization must handle them with integrity, with fairness, and with a clear communicated process. Hiding conflict or sweeping it under the rug destroys trust instantly and permanently.
So it's not enough to be ethical. You must be seen to be ethical, especially when resources or power are involved. The existence of a clear, published conflict resolution protocol builds confidence in the organization's resilience.
Exactly. Loyalty is born from this demonstrable trust. Stability is born from that loyalty. And stability is the ultimate foundation for sustainable, multi-generational growth.
Finally, we have Practice 14, which tackles adaptability and cultural sensitivity. And this leads right into the necessity of building diversity. The sources frame diversity not just as a moral good, but as a strategic necessity for resilience.
Right. True growth is growth in variety and perspective. Cultural, social, demographic, and economic. And it's a strategic imperative because diversity brings broader perspectives to problem solving. It dramatically enhances organizational creativity, and it builds stronger community resilience to external shocks.
So if your organization only reflects one small demographic, its worldview and its problem-solving capacity are severely limited.
And it cannot effectively serve its broader community, which was the whole point of Practice 6. You become an echo chamber.
This means intentional action is required. You can't just sit back and wait for diversity to happen on its own.
No, it requires a 3-part approach. First, audit your demographics. Leaders must honestly assess who is currently attending, leading, and volunteering, and then identify who is missing. Age, race, income, family status, etc. Intentional outreach. This means creating strategic programming and partnerships that are specifically designed to engage the missing segments of the community.
And third is inclusion.
Yes. Designing inclusive worship experiences, rotating musical styles, readings, even languages, and ensuring that you have diverse leadership representation across all of your functional teams.
And the distinction between diversity and inclusion is absolutely paramount here.
It is. Diversity is about having different people in the room. Inclusion is about ensuring their voices are heard, valued, and have an impact on decision-making. The sources emphasize that a diverse organization with an exclusionary culture will generate immense internal friction and ultimately shatter.
The true organizational strength comes from equitable participation.
Yes, where every perspective feels valued and respected. This is what fuels the organization's learning capacity we talked about in Practice 15 and makes it truly adaptable for the long haul.
We have systematically dismantled these 15 comprehensive practices for organizational health and community building, from strategic vision all the way to governance.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. So let's bring it all together into the simple, actionable, 6-step framework the source material provides. This really serves as a checklist for any learner who's trying to apply these concepts.
This framework is the synthesis of everything we've discussed. It provides a logical, sequential workflow that ensures all these moving parts are coordinated.
Okay, step 1, make community your core.
This is the purpose. Sunday is a necessary tool for inspiration and alignment, but the real work-belonging transformation service that must happen throughout the week.
Step 2, use the 10 Commandments as a community blueprint.
This is your ethical roadmap. It's Practice 5. It defines the non-negotiable standards of behavior, ensuring trust, integrity, and minimizing internal conflict.
Step 3, Prioritize small groups.
They are the organizational heartbeat, another part of Practice 5. They have to operate at that optimal size of 5 to 9 people to maximize intimacy, accountability, and the development of future leaders, which is Practice 7.
Step 4. Empower volunteers as co-creators.
Recognize them, train them, rotate them using professional management principles.
Mhm.
They are the engine, Practice 12, that turns the mission into real action and outreach.
Step 5. Engage all generations.
You have to create tailored programs and structured mentorship pathways. That's Practice 11. You do this to intentionally integrate all life stages, preventing the organization from becoming an age-segregated silo.
And step 6. Build diversity.
This means performing intentional demographic audits, engaging in strategic outreach, and ensuring genuine inclusion. That's Practice 14. You do it to maximize resilience, problem-solving capacity, and relevance to the broader community.
This framework outlines a powerful logical workflow. It consolidates all 15 practices into a continuous growth cycle.
It does. The Sunday service feeds the vision and inspiration into the small groups. The small groups generate community depth, accountability, and they identify new leaders.
Those new leaders then drive volunteer engagement.
And the volunteers power the strategic outreach and the community programs. Successful outreach results in multi-generational and diverse integration.
And that integration leads directly back to a strengthened, resilient community, which then drives more organic growth. It's a flywheel.
It's a complete self-reinforcing cycle.
The critical insight here is the interdependence of all the parts. If any single link in that chain is weak, if the small groups aren't functioning effectively as transformation zones, or if the governance, Practice 13, is non-transparent,
The entire system stalls. The service remains an anonymous spectacle, the outreach loses its focus, and the organization remains chronically fragile regardless of its size.
the sources insist that the measure of success is the systemic health of that entire cycle. When all 15 practices are operational and aligned with the central mission from Practice 1, the organization operates as a highly complex, interconnected ecosystem.
And one that's capable of sustaining exponential growth over generations.
It's the ultimate lesson in institutional design. The success of this organizational model hinges on creating a decentralized, accountable mechanism where every single member feels known, supported, and connected, while at the same time ensuring the institution maintains the highest ethical and managerial standards. What an expansive and detailed deep dive into organizational health. The key takeaway for anyone running a large community-focused organization, whether it's a nonprofit, a large company, or a social movement, is this.
Yeah, what's the one thing?
The most durable form of success hinges on your ability to make the large feel small. You have to use mechanisms like that intentional small group structure. And you have to translate your abstract ideals, whether those are spiritual principles or corporate values or mission statements, into tangible daily acts of service and ethical behavior.
Growth, in this view, is the result of optimizing a relationship-based ecosystem, not just operating a profit machine. It's rooted in shared values, it's nourished by deep connection, and it's guided by strategic purpose.
The source material shows you that the most enduring organizational growth isn't generated by marketing or overwhelming capital.
No. It's generated by optimizing relationships and ensuring every member feels profoundly known, supported, and connected.
The moment people stop passively attending the organization and start actively becoming the organization, the living embodiment of its values, the numbers and the impact naturally follow the purpose.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over long after this deep dive concludes.
Okay, let's hear it.
If community is the ultimate purpose and shared value alignment, be it spiritual devotion or corporate ethics, is the tool that strengthens our individual ability to love, collaborate, and serve others. How can organizations of all types, even purely secular or highly technical ones, apply the structure of the Ten Commandments, that ancient, non-negotiable blueprint? How can they use it to create a similar inherent culture of trust, accountability, and ethical behavior among its members?
So, beyond standard HR policies,
Exactly. What secular commandments or non-negotiable ethical standards are essential for building a truly resilient, multi-generational community that can thrive in that age of abundance?